J Dilla is well known for producing for artists like Common, Erykah Badu, The Roots, The Pharcyde, A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, and many more, as well as his solo albums like what is now probably his most well-known work, Donuts. And all of that is incredible music that is not only influential, but feels just so good. But there's one album that doesn't come up in the Dilla conversation enough. Well, two, actually. It's some of his best work. It was a turning point for him as a producer and helped birth the neo-soul movement. Well, I guess it's kind of three albums. I mean, it's multiple versions of the same two albums that share some of the same tracks. Anyway, we'll get there. All right, I'll just tell you what we're talking about today. Slum Village. If you're a Dilla fan and you don't know Slum Village, man, get ready, because it's some of Dilla's finest work, and that is saying a lot. If you're already a Slum Village fan, you're in the right place. We're diving into the story of fan-tas-tic Volume 1 and 2 of Slum Village and of this pivotal transition time for J Dilla, aka JD, aka James DeWitt Yancey. We'll dive into a few songs to see how his production evolved, why this album, well, I guess both of them, aren't as well known, and how it birthed the neo-soul movement. Slum Village is comprised of T3, Batin, and JD. They all grew up in the Conant Gardens neighborhood of Detroit and all attended the same high school. JD produced the beats while all three members rapped. Now Dilla's MPC is in the Smithsonian, but at the very beginning, he had a local mentor who helped him find his way to the instrument. That mentor was Amp Fiddler, a musician and producer best known for his work with Parliament and Funkadelic. He had an MPC, and once JD got connected with him, well, I'll let him explain.
I had purchased the MPC from a demo deal that I got from Polygram Records, and I got an MPC 60, and he came to the house with the rest of the rappers that wanted to record. I told them that I couldn't make the beats because I didn't have that much time, so I could help them, but they needed someone who could be more creative in the process. And they said, oh, that's cool. We have James. He showed me how he had sampled from cassette tape to cassette tape, cassette tape, cassette tape, cassette tape, overdub cassette tape. I said, this is amazing. I don't know how you're doing this. I said, bring me the samples and we're gonna make them in the music from the MPC. Dilla heard everything. He heard the intro, the verse, the chorus, the vamp, everything. It was all in the arrangement, and all the samples were different for one song. So he was a genius, and all the samples were relative in key to each other. So he was already a genius when he came to my house. All he needed to know was the technical aspect of the machine. He came to my house just about every day after that.
Amp Fiddler is also responsible for introducing Dilla to the person who would take him to the next level. While on Lollapalooza tour with George Clinton, Amp Fiddler shared the festival stage with A Tribe Called Quest. He could hear the similarity and inspiration in JD's music and was adamant that Q-Tip made him when the tour swung through Detroit. To make a long story short, after meeting Dilla in 1994 and hearing a beat tape from him, Q-Tip was floored. Tip quickly became a JD evangelist and played his music for anyone that would listen. This led to JD getting more production work, some on his own and some through the Ummah, a production collective that included Q-Tip and Ali Shaheed Muhammad of Tribe, and JD. We'll talk more about that in just a moment, but throughout the next few years, as Dilla continued to build his production career, he remained in Slum Village, and their first album, fan-tas-tic Volume 1, was crazy for several reasons. I want to get into that, but first I want to get into the production of one of the songs on fan-tas-tic Volume 1. The song is I Don't Know, and actually this song is on fan-tas-tic Volume 1 and fan-tas-tic Volume 2. We've got so much more ground to cover, but let's just get into it. One thing I love about this song is the James Brown samples. James Brown has been sampled in hip-hop, tens of thousands of times. It's usually for a drum break like the funky drummer, or maybe a vocal stab here and there, but on I Don't Know, Slum Village is sampling the Godfather of Soul differently. I say Slum Village instead of JD in this case because this was T3's idea, to essentially rap along with James Brown. Like, rap, but then have James Brown finish the line with a sample. There are a ton of James Brown vocal samples throughout this song, but the other big sample here is the song ISOI by Brazilian guitarist Baden Powell. The original song has this flamenco feel, and it's subdivided in threes. So let me show you what I mean. The yellow track up here, this is the Slum Village song. Just below this is ISOI. Let's hear what this sounds like. So the subdivision and all of that is very, very fast, right? But what Dilla has done is basically taken this section right here, pitched it down 8 semitones, which stretches it as well, time-wise. And then I'm isolating just the right channel, and then I'm having just the mids come through. So now let's listen to what that sounds like. So that triplet feel is still in there, da, 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 da. But on top of that, or underneath it, I guess, is this straight 4/4 drum pattern. The subdivision there is just 2s, right? But when you play them both together, check us out. We add some sub bass in there and it rounds the whole thing out. I love all of this because it's a perfect combination of putting a new twist on a classic sampled artist while reworking a Brazilian sample that has this 3 feel in it with a groove that's in 4. It's all very Dilla. Oh, and on the fan-tas-tic Volume 2 version of this song, it features DJ Jazzy Jeff scratching. If you're looking for records to sample in your own productions, like say something Brazilian like this, you should check out TrackLib. They're sponsoring this video, so let me show you how it works. TrackLib is an online record store specifically for sampling. They've got a huge catalog, over 100,000 songs and multi-tracks. There's a 100% guarantee of fast, easy clearance, and they recently announced they're officially dropping sample clearance fees. So if you subscribe to TrackLib, you can clear samples without paying anything more. So let me search for Brazilian music and see what they got. I'll go to Bossa Nova grooves, I'll sort by region. Let's go South America. One thing that's cool about TrackLib is before you use any credits to download, I can preview the song, and then I can also loop part of it and add a beat on top. So I kind of know what I'm getting into. I'm going to add both of these to my Digging the Greats playlist on TrackLib. I've put together some of my favorite songs for you to go download and mess around with, so go check it out. To get started yourself, click the link in the description. You'll get a free 3-day trial and 15 free downloads. So, right, JD is building up his production career and getting busier and busier. But T3 and Batin wanted to record something for Slum Village and insisted that they get JD to do it. He agreed, but under one crazy condition. Rather than make the beats for the album and then record raps on top, the way it's normally done, he insisted that they record the vocals first, to nothing other than a click track. That's the metronome that clicks while you're recording. It's stale and lifeless. It's just keeping the beat. T3 says that about half the songs on fan-tas-tic Volume 1 were recorded this way, to just click, while the other half had beats, but Dilla ended up changing them later anyway. The other crazy thing about the recording of this album is that the vocals were recorded straight to DAT, which means you only have one take, and if you screwed up, you gotta start from the beginning. They recorded some parts with a cheap mic, and other parts with a pair of headphones plugged into the mic input, acting like a mic. So Dilla is getting more and more production work, producing for A Tribe Called Quest and getting more work with the Ummah. He reluctantly agrees to work on the Slum Village album, and when they get to recording the vocals, they're rapping into just a pair of headphones, recording to just click, and you have to do it in one take. So Naturally, tensions were a little high, and that's why this album is full of trash talking, secretly directed at each other. They were all mad at each other and took it out by rapping, into the headphones with just click. It's crazy. The way this album was released is also unusual, but we'll get into that in just a moment. First, I want to break down JD's production on another song that's on fan-tas-tic Volume 1 and 2, Players. This is another one, similar to I Don't Know, where Dilla is combining elements of classic hip-hop, as well as a dramatically slowed down sample that transforms the song completely, in a way that only he could do. The primary sample is from the song Claire by the Singers Unlimited from 1974. This song is entirely a cappella with rich harmonies throughout it. Let me play you the original sample and you'll start to hear how this morphs into the Slum Village song. So this grayed out track right here is the Singers Unlimited Claire. The orange part, this is the sample we're looking for. So key parts of this sample are here. Also these vocal chords right here. Dilla has taken these a cappella chords and pitched them down and replayed them, pitching a couple of them down even further. Here's the full pattern. And you can hear the sample at the end, the word Claire, but because it's been slowed down so far, the lyric has morphed and now sounds like the word player. This is incredible, not only the final result, the Slum Village song, which sounds amazing, but knowing how he built this track. But we're not even half done. For the drums, Dilla sampled one of the most well-known songs in all of hip-hop, Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang. So check it out, here's a snare and hi-hat, just that right there. And then he's adding his own kick, which is imperfect. It's so Dilla, it's amazing. The only thing missing now is bass. This is a very subby, very Dilla-sounding synth bass. Let's put all of these elements together. I'm gonna say it so you don't have to. Yeah, that's not as good as Dilla. There's probably gonna still be people in the comments saying that, but here's what's so crazy about this to me. That drum pattern is so loose and moves around. It has a lot of elasticity to it, but then that compared with those vocal samples and that incredible subby bass, it all just goes together so well and so uniquely. The way this album, fan-tas-tic Volume 1, was released was completely DIY. Rather than shop it to a label and go the standard route, they made cassette copies themselves, distributing it directly to people who wanted it. Of course, at this point, it wasn't called fan-tas-tic Volume 1, it was just fan-tas-tic. You have to remember, this was a big deal for 1996 and 1997. The internet had not yet changed the music industry. Digital distribution was not a thing. There was no Spotify, no iTunes, no Napster even. So the fact that you can only get this on tape and not in any store, maybe a bootleg version, and the album is this good, that made this album very popular, just not in any of the official channels. Q-Tip helped spread this album far and wide as well. He and D'Angelo famously played it over the phone to Questlove, who was in Europe with the Roots. He listened to the album over the phone, again, no digital distribution, racking up over $300 in long-distance phone charges. This album, fan-tas-tic, later called fan-tas-tic Volume 1, is a landmark album, even though it wasn't widely distributed. It did get an official release finally in 2006, but in 1997 it was an underground secret. We've already looked at some of Dilla's production on this album, and we're going to look at a few other examples in a moment, but this is a turning point in his production and would influence many other musicians, some of whom I've already named. Because of the success of this incredibly DIY album, Slum Village started getting more recognition, leading them to eventually sign with A&M Records and get to work on their next release, what would be called fan-tas-tic Volume 2. But Dilla started feeling like he wanted to do his own thing. He was grateful for everything Q-Tip had done for him, but didn't want to be part of the Ummah. He wanted to do his own thing and be recognized for his work, not just the Ummah. And as his production career grew, he began to feel the same way about Slum Village. But first, the group excitedly started to work on their first major release, fan-tas-tic Volume 2. Volume 2 is more polished, showing what the group is fully capable of. Since Volume 1 hadn't been officially released, some of the songs from Volume 1 made it over onto Volume 2. That's why I say this is sort of one album, sort of two. They're different albums, but this early discography of Slum Village is a little amorphous. There are also multiple versions of Volume 2. fan-tas-tic Volume 2 is not only more polished, but because Dilla was more connected at this point, there are many guest features. D'Angelo, Busta Rhymes, Pete Rock. The song Thelonious not only features Common, but that song also is on Common's album, Like Water for Chocolate. Q-Tip's relationship with JD was straining because of the Ummah situation, but on top of that, Tip had just suffered a house fire and lost not only a ton of records, but a lot of work they had done for the Love movement. This was what was supposed to be the final Tribe album. So when Tip flew into Detroit to record his verse on Hold Tight, he announced that he was done. He was leaving hip-hop, and it's all in the hands of Slum Village now. So Slum Village is the hottest new hip-hop group with the hottest new producer. They've created buzz with a DIY release of fan-tas-tic Volume 1. They've gotten signed to a label, have a ton of guest features, including Q-Tip, who is effectively passing the torch from Tribe to Slum. By late 1998, the album was complete, delivered to the label, and A&M Records began sending out advanced copies of fan-tas-tic Volume 2. But unexpectedly, in January of 1999, A&M Records shut down. This album features a few other new tricks from Dilla production-wise. One is a brand new way to feel the beat, specifically by rushing the snare. So take the song Go Ladies. I love this song because it features a sample by Don Blackman, who is incredible, and Tom Scott, who Pete Rock also sampled for They Reminisce Over You. But let's focus just on the drums. I'm going to play just the drum pattern. Notice how unique this feel is because of the rush snare. That hi-hat is steady all the way through, but that snare with the claps comes just a little sooner than you're expecting, which makes the whole thing wobble a little. I made a whole other video breaking down this technique and how Dilla intentionally programmed his MPC to do this. But this technique would become a signature sound for Dilla and inspire many more musicians, changing the way they play and produce music. Another example is a technique similar to what we've seen already, slowing the sample down so far that it exaggerates the imperfections. So check out this sample from Gap Mangione. We're gonna start slowing it down. Now let's add on top of that Dilla has slowed this way down, but he's not worried about the sample perfectly lining up with the drums. His drums aren't perfect anyway. These are great examples of Dilla's unique time feel, Dilla time, which, yes, this is the part of the video that I mention Dan Charnas's fan-tas-tic book. It's a primary source for this video. Just incredible. If you're a Dilla fan or a music fan at all, this is a must-read. So J Dilla is killing it on all fronts, doing some crazy new stuff on this album. He's already working with some of the greatest artists out there. There's a lot of buzz about this new group that's gonna be the successors to A Tribe Called Quest. And then in January of 1999, A&M Records shuts down. Slum Village had already delivered the final record, but still had to do photos and artwork for the album. Long story short, the album remained in limbo for another year and a half, but meanwhile it would be heavily bootlegged and spread far and wide, similar to how Volume 1 had been distributed, except even further. Slum Village toured Europe based on bootlegs alone. The album made it to Interscope, and as they mulled over whether to release it or not, the song Get This Money was featured in the movie Office Space. Interscope ended up passing on the album, but this song remains as the only Slum Village single on Interscope for this reason. Eventually, the album was bought and then distributed by Good Vibe Recordings. Because Volume 2 had been bootlegged so much, Slum Village agreed to add 4 more tracks for the official release. So there's fan-tas-tic Volume 1, which was all bootleg, all DIY. fan-tas-tic Volume 2, which was pre-released and then bootlegged, but featured some songs from Volume 1, some of which have different names. And then for the official release of Volume 2, there are 4 more songs included. That's not to mention fan-tas-tic Volume 2.10, which was released in 2010 and features additional tracks and alternate versions of songs. But the official version of fan-tas-tic Volume 2 by Slum Village, the first official version, was released in June of 2000. This was squarely in the midst of the Soulquarians movement, which featured acts like The Roots, Erykah Badu, Common, D'Angelo, all of whom JD had worked with. Remember how I said that fan-tas-tic by Slum Village, both versions, all versions, birthed the neo-soul movement? I'm pulling that from Questlove, who said, "Hands down, this album birthed the neo-soul movement. It was a new way to present raw funk in a contemporary sense." In this case, he's talking specifically about fan-tas-tic Volume 1. You know, the one he paid crazy long-distance phone bills just to listen to? But knowing how Volume 1 led to Volume 2, the crossover between songs, and the polish that's on Volume 2, I think the same could be said of all of this early Slum Village stuff in general. And knowing that 1997-1998 is when these bootlegs were getting passed around, and that this was the time the Soulquarians were camping out in Electric Lady, recording these classic records, you can see the direct influence between what J Dilla was doing on this early Slum stuff and the masterpiece albums like Voodoo, Things Fall Apart, Like Water for Chocolate. Slum Village had a long, difficult road to get fan-tas-tic Volume 2 released, and as soon as they finally made a deal with Good Vibe, they dropped a bomb. JD was leaving the group. Dilla showed up for music video shoots after this, and they still had a good relationship with him. I mean, he produced a few songs for Slum after this, but he wanted to focus on his own producing career. Slum Village started a tour with Good Vibe Recordings, and Dilla flew out to New York to be in the infamous Soulquarians photo shoot for Vibe magazine. fan-tas-tic Volume 2 marks the end of an era for Slum Village. They would continue on with multiple other members coming and going, but it also marks the end of an era for J Dilla. He was now involved with the Soulquarians scene, producing for bigger artists and ready to start a solo career. But the impact of this album, these albums, this early Slum stuff, it can't be overstated. It's some of J Dilla's finest work, some of Slum Village's best work, and would be influential for so many artists for years to come. The tragedy of Slum Village is for how difficult it was to get this music officially released, and how influential this music was and still is. fan-tas-tic Volume 1 and 2 still are not recognized as much as they should be. It's incredible music and a turning point in J Dilla's production. In February of 2001, J Dilla released his first solo album, Welcome to Detroit. In 2003, he released Champion Sound as J-Lib, a collaboration with Madlib. And in 2006, 3 days before his passing, he released his most well-known work, Donuts, which is full of hidden meanings and clues. Or is it? That's a whole other video and a whole other era of Dilla, so to dive into that story, you gotta click here.